Hi friends, in this video I'm going to show you the top 10 foods that I ate to reduce symptoms of my own inflammation. And number 1 is kale. This is an evergreen, dark, broadleafy vegetable. And when I first learned how to shop on my own as a college student, I was really overwhelmed by the choices in the produce aisle. I was also living on a budget. So as a student, I really didn't want to buy this much produce because I was afraid it would rot. But kale is really different. It doesn't rot like spinach. It's a sturdier cruciferous vegetable and can last about a week in the refrigerator if you put this in a bag with a paper towel to suck up the moisture in that bag. So I literally just started with one plant, and for me that was kale, and trained myself to eat it. Now, when you go to the store, you will see purple kale, curly kale, and this kale. This is dinosaur kale. And most of the time when I order a kale salad at a restaurant, it's made from curly kale. It has a milder taste, but it's really hard to wash because it's so curly. And honestly, I began buying this type of kale because it was easier to wash. Unfortunately, I buy organic, and sometimes insects like the plants that I buy just as much. And they get trapped behind the kale leaves. And I don't really mind the extra protein, but honestly, I just find it kind of disgusting to eat it. But if I had to, I'm sure I would learn how to eat bugs. So I just had a hard time washing curly kale. And that's why I began to eat dinosaur kale. Now, all kales, they contain a unique phytonutrient called sulfurophane that protects the body against oxidative stress. Oxidation describes a process that happens in the presence of oxygen, which surrounds us. And this is a normal process that happens to everybody all the time. And it really helps us fight pathogens and defeat infections. So why is it so bad? Well, heard of friendly fire? When soldiers have a friendly fire incident, there are innocent soldiers that die. So oxidation is a friendly fire incident that can damage our innocent cells, proteins, fats, and DNA. When these vital components get damaged, our blood sugar rises, the blood pressure goes up, you get wrinkles on your face, you get tired, and that's just the beginning of aging. And if you have ever met a longtime smoker, you know that they look twice their age and their metabolism is so much older than their actual birth age. And that's because the toxins in their cigarettes are aging them, and their body is undergoing massive oxidative stress every time they inhale. Luckily, they exhale. Otherwise, they would accumulate those toxins even faster. And you see, when oxygen is metabolized, free radicals get formed, such as singlet oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, superoxides, and hydroxyl anions. These are just fancy names of molecules that are collectively known as free radicals or reactive oxygen species. And they're literally bombs. Have you ever played hot potato? It's a game in which you want to keep passing the object around and you don't want to end up with it, because when time's up, if you have the object, then you're out. And remember the scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the guy holds a medallion and burns his hand? This is the same with reactive oxygen species. It's the hot potato that will destroy anything it touches. So in essence, free radicals or reactive oxygen species will harm our bodies when we have too much of it. And this is what causes diseases from eczema to hay fever and hives to diabetes, heart disease, and cancers. So my personal health goal for myself and my family is to eat to reduce oxidative stress. And that is how I squash my inflammation and slow down my body's aging. Now, it is impossible to be stress-free. And my goal is not to be stress-free, as a little bit of stress is good and the body can handle that. It is impossible not to inhale air pollutants, especially if you live in LA. So even if you don't smoke, if you live in a big city like Southern California, and especially a mile from the freeway, you are just inhaling toxins like what we find in cigarette smokes. Southern California, besides air pollution from car exhaust, we have forest fires, we have tons of restaurant fumes, people barbecuing over holidays, cooking fumes in our kitchen, candles, and of course the freeway exhaust, right? They all tax our bodies and give us oxidative stress. And this is why it's important to eat antioxidants every day. And the little kale is a powerful antioxidant. Now, it's important to chop up this leaf and let it sit for 30 minutes to release the enzymes in it called myrosinase that are trapped within the cells, because these myrosinase, they actually convert another compound in it called glucoraphanin into sulforaphanes, which you want the sulforaphanes. But sometimes if you're in a hurry and you have to cook it and you can't wait 30 minutes, well, just throw in a pinch of mustard seed powder because they also have myrosinase. But don't cook that myrosinase because that myrosinase is not heat stable. Now, I prefer dinosaur kale because of this dark green leafy color. This green color tells me that my food has more nutrients. It has more chlorophyll. In the center of the chlorophyll is a molecule called magnesium. Magnesium is really a mineral that's important for all of us. It's actually involved in over 300 normal daily biochemical reactions. The scary thing is, if you don't have enough magnesium in your diet, do you know where your body gets your magnesium from? Your bone. So people with magnesium deficient diets are at higher risk of osteoporosis later on in life. And the problem with osteoporosis is that you don't have a problem until you have a major catastrophic event like a fracture. And the most common places people fracture is in the spine, the hip, and the wrists. So how do you eat a diet rich in magnesium? Magnesium-rich foods are seeds like pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, leafy greens like kale, and of course beans. And if this is not your diet, then most likely you're eating a magnesium deficient diet. Now, some of you have made comments that I talk too much about scary things that could go wrong with health. Well, that's my day job. And literally, my job description as a medical doctor is to look for scary things. I'm an infectious disease doctor, so I deal with really scary things that go wrong with health all the time. And by the time I'm invited to a case, sometimes the damage is already done. And there's only so much that can be done to reverse the damage. And this is why I want to know the scary things that can happen so I can put more effort into finding the right food. And by understanding the consequences to my nutrition, then I'm honestly more motivated to put in the hard work to eat stuff that I really don't want to eat. And my goal is not to scare anybody, but this is the reality of life. And I hope that you have a thorough understanding of why food should be eaten and why others should be avoided. Otherwise, you may not question the plethora of wrong and harmful nutrition recommendations in the store shelves, on commercials, and on the internet. And my video archives are really for my children. One day they will decide to listen to me. I hope that one day my children and my grandchildren, they'll turn me on even when I'm not around, and they'll listen to what grandma had to say about food and nutrition, because what I'm talking about is really tried and true and has stood the test of time. I'm not making any of this stuff up. Maybe the science is new, but the practices of how I eat and how I advocate for people to eat have been eaten for thousands of years. Number 2 is the cauliflower. So when you shop for cauliflower, there are different colors. My farmer just grows this white cauliflower, so I buy it from him. Now, I buy produce from my local farmer because I believe it's healthier. I can taste the flavor difference. Now, I like cauliflower because when you cook it long enough, it's really hard for people to tell that it's not a starch. And of course, you have to chop it small enough so that they can't quite tell. It's also white in color, so it blends in with starchy foods like white potato very well without an interrogation from my family. And yet, it is also a cruciferous vegetable. When you chop it smaller, you increase the surface area so it cooks faster and absorbs whatever flavor you put better. Cauliflower is blander in taste, so it's very, very different from eating a kale. And cauliflower is actually a great transition vegetable for people who want to learn how to eat vegetables. And it's amazing how this green color turns people off. I mean, if this was money, everybody would be flocking to it. But when you present them with green food, people are so adverse to it, unless it's like green frosting on cupcakes. So I've learned some tools of the trade to slide in more antioxidants with cooked cauliflower. This is a powerful fiber-rich vegetable. It is also high in calcium, vitamin K, and folate. And of course, remember, don't buy one that's brown or black speckled. That's probably mold. You don't want to eat that. Now, how do you make boring food like whole plants taste better? Our food is boring these days because our farming practices are mega growing food, sacrificing flavor for quantity. And that's why, again, I buy local so that my produce can be harvested fresh And then I can start with more flavorful ingredients so I don't have to work as hard to make it taste better. And the second thing is that people underestimate a lot of our taste has to do with aroma. I'm sure you remember the feelings you got when you smelled your favorite fruit as a kid. And every time you smell something similar, it reminds you of those happy times. And this is why adding spices adds aroma to all food, to whether it's plants, animals, or processed. And if you're trying to make vegetables taste better, then number one, steam the vegetable. Don't boil it, because then you'll lose a lot of the flavor and aroma. A lot of the boiling goes in the water. That's one way to make broth. And when you steam it, you trap the aroma in the vegetable. And then add your favorite seasonings and treat it as if you're making meat. And that's really how I started making my vegetables more palatable. Now, number three is broccoli. Now, so far, I've only been talking about cruciferous veggies. And this is because these veggies have been proven to be the most powerful family of vegetables in preserving our health span. And there are so many family members. And when you eat any of this list of cruciferous vegetables, sulforaphanes get absorbed into your bloodstream and the metabolites ultimately will get urinated out. And that's actually a good thing, because then that is a marker that people can measure to see if they're actually eating cruciferous vegetables and what happens to people who are. Now, women with higher urinary metabolites of sulforaphane, they actually have a lower risk of breast cancer. And this study found that at least 5 servings a week was associated with a reduced risk of lymphomas. Now, lymphoma is a lymph node cancer. All cruciferous vegetables have glucosinolates, which can become sulforaphanes after you chop them up to release the enzyme myrosinase. And these are kept separately so that when we break the plant, it combines together to make it fresh for us. And myrosinase is a critical component to get sulforaphanes in your body. And again, unfortunately, myrosinase is sensitive to heat. So cooking vegetables will destroy the myrosinase, but it won't destroy sulforaphanes. And that's why if you pre-chop your vegetables about 30 minutes before you cook it, and then if you add a pinch of mustard powder just before you eat, you can also increase your sulforaphane levels as well. Ultimately, the goal is to eat at least 5 servings a week of a variety of cooked and raw cruciferous vegetables, such as broccoli, cauliflower, kale. Sprouts are excellent, and cabbage. These powerful vegetables can help you lower your risk of several cancers. I mentioned 2, but you can also reduce your risk of lung, prostate, colorectal, and stomach cancers. Now, if you've watched my previous videos on my own personal health journey, then you may remember that as a child, I had finger eczema, which was great because I got out of washing dishes, but sucked because it was always dry and bleeding. I suffered from runny, stuffy noses, itchy red eyes, and headaches were just a normal part of my life throughout college. And one day my body just had enough. I was covered with itchy patches and scratching myself silly in my sleep. And like many young people, I thought I was actually healthy and just assumed hay fever, allergies were a normal part of life. But I drew the line when I looked like I had a contagious infectious rash that prevented me from sleeping. And in the past, I had assumed some people just got dealt with bad genes and that my autoimmune inflammatory symptoms was genetic. And that was my young, naive, ignorant doctor self in me. And the problem is all autoimmune diseases also contribute to higher risk of getting more cancers, especially if people take immunosuppressive medications. Now, if it was just a matter of caring for myself, I really don't think I would care so much. But as a young mom with young kids, I was really motivated to keep myself healthy just so that I can perform my normal childcare duties. And you see, I was so used to writing prescriptions to cure diseases that it was so frustrating I could write no prescription for myself. And unlike diabetes, heart failure, and asthma, when I wrote a prescription to treat an infectious disease, it was usually an attempt for a cure. Unfortunately, drug companies, they stopped investing in my field, and there has not been any new antibiotics released for a long time. And you don't make money when you cure people of their diseases. And hence it's getting harder and harder to cure infections because the germs are getting smarter and more drug resistant, and people's bodies are getting weaker from multiple toxins in the environment. And the loss of antibiotics is just really another tragedy in modern farming practices. And we blame patients and doctors for overusing and overprescribing antibiotics, which is partially true, But the bulk of our antibiotics is fed to livestock and farm animals, decrease feeding costs, and increase their growth rate. So for those of you who are against genetically modified plants and happily eating animals fed with antibiotics, well, you are eating genetically modified animals. This perfect storm, massive drug resistance in farm animals with no investment from pharmaceutical and governments in antibiotic research, is why we are entering the post-antibiotic era. And before you blame Big Pharma, our government, and big agriculture for our global problem, think about the free market and how that market works. Companies invent things that people like, that people will buy. So if consumers demand more meat and don't mind eating antibiotic-fed animals, then they will continue to do it cheaply and feed animals antibiotics to bring meat to market. And if consumers refuse to pay for antibiotics, why would a company invest in hundreds of millions of dollars to create a product that is unpopular? Instead, they're going to go invest in a gold mine in diabetes, heart, and cholesterol and cancer drugs. But even for those who don't eat any animals, your food may still be contaminated with drug-resistant bacteria since farm waste runoff often contaminate produce. So I'm telling you this for prevention. Just like recycling, we all need to participate in preserving antibiotics for our children and grandchildren. And we can do that by eating less animals or paying extra to demand antibiotic-free food. Now, when it comes to my family and my health, drugs really are not an option whenever possible. Now, I was never the mom to call my pediatrician for random antibiotics, as that is really the last drug that I would ever want my child to take. Antibiotics can cause autoimmune diseases, and it can cause massive inflammation in organ systems. And for sure, it will always destroy the best immune buffer, the gut microbiome. But sometimes you can't help but use it. And so when I can avoid it, I try to, but sometimes it's not avoidable. Whenever there is another option, then that's always a different story. And when my first child was born, he suffered the worst eczema that I have ever seen. He was given a course of antibiotics to save his life. And imagine yourself looking at something beet red from head to toe. That was him at night scratching endlessly. That is how bad it was. And we had to put little tiny gloves on his tiny hands to cover his razor sharp tiny nails. And normally a doctor would recommend steroid creams. And to me, that was a no-no, because in my book, my child was not going to get skin thinning and increase his risk of cancer, although very, very small, from using some steroid cream. But as a mom with, knowing the worst that can happen, I really did not want to start this endless cycle of steroids to squash his problem, because it's just a temporary Band-Aid. Plus, there's no way that I was going to lather him with steroids from head to toe. That's just not an option for me. So I had no choice but to change his diet. But the complex part of this story is that his diet was really my diet because I was nursing him. So I had to fix my diet and to cure him of his eczema. And really, this whole journey has helped me fix my inflammation, reduce my allergies, and understand that it's really not just about adding good ingredients, but I also had to remove triggers. And I'll tell you what his trigger was a little later. Now, the foods that I started focusing on eating are the same foods that I still eat today. And this is my weekly fresh produce. No, these are not the only things I eat, but my diet is heavily centered around fresh food. And you know how when you go to the restaurant, the main course is usually a piece of meat or some starch like spaghetti noodles? That was my old diet. And I have learned now that that diet got me sick. Tasty, but super sick. And now I center my diet around fresh produce. And I have kept this recipe so that I continue to feel better and better. Now, I've learned that food quality is really hard to find in pre-made foods. And I thought frozen, pre-packaged healthy meals with some broccoli in takeout dishes or pre-made in supermarkets or restaurants was good enough. I lived with my mother-in-law for several years and basically didn't cook and would microwave or buy takeout. She would discourage me from doing that and told me it was unhealthy. I was super busy as a young mom and a working physician. I didn't listen to her. And at that time, I thought, well, she's old. Old people, they have like their ideal world, but this is a modern world, and the food is so much better, so much more convenient in our modern lifestyle. Boy, was I wrong. Modern foods are worse, are less healthy, and we have tricked our palates to believe that they are more nutritious, but they're actually less nutritious, less flavorful, and they have more salt, fat, and sugar to get people to eat it. And think about the last food you ate that had no sauce, no dip, no batter, no seasoning. Her palate resisted all this modern temptations because she grew up eating simple dishes with more nutritious, flavorful plants. And I watched her eat her boiled vegetables and fresh fruits from breakfast to dinner, and she always avoided all the restaurant foods, even though I was happily willing to share with her. She's now 92 and is still walking on her own. And now I eat like her. I know she watches my YouTube videos, so Mom, you are right. Notice almost everything on my table is a shade of dark green, blue, or red. So number 4 are the red colored plants. Can you find the bell pepper in the tomato bowl? It is in the back. I look for red colored plants to get carotenoids, which are powerful antioxidants to help reduce inflammation. People with higher blood levels of carotenoids have a lower risk of heart disease, improved triglyceride and cholesterols, and men also have improved blood sugars and smaller waists. Now it makes sense. Carotenoids are primarily found in plants like the red bell pepper. Carotenoids are really antioxidants that protect our brain from oxidizing. And when you eat carotenoids, you're actually helping out your strongest detoxification system called the glutathione redox system. And this system also needs sulforaphanes. Carotenoids actually become vitamin A, an essential fat-soluble vitamin critical for growth and immunity. Children who are vitamin A deficient have a higher mortality to infectious diseases, and those who have absorption issues are at higher risk of vitamin A deficiency. Vitamin A deficiencies cause a lot of problems, including the inability to see in low light or xerophthalmia, which can lead to blindness. Deficiency also increases skin and respiratory diseases, measles, diarrhea, and anemia. Now, drug companies spend millions creating topical eczema creams. Neither one was an option for me for breastfeeding, but creams are still band-aids for an underlying immunity inflammation issue for myself and my infant. And hence, I started to eat more red, fresh produce like red bell peppers. And did you know that one red bell pepper has as much vitamin C as 3 oranges? Number 5 are red beets. As a working breastfeeding mom, I was tired. Not only was I sleep deprived because I was nursing throughout the night, but I also had to drive at least an hour to and from work, and I was roughly working at least 10 hours a day, studying for my medical boards, as well as practicing as a young physician. But I knew that nitrate-rich plants like beets powered athletes. Beets were shown to drop systolic blood pressure by 10 points and decrease the time of exhaustion by 1 minute and 32 seconds in professional cyclists. It also helped freedivers hold their breath half a minute longer and helped runners feel less tired when performing better. These beets are so tiny, but are so powerful. Beets contain a lot of anti-inflammatory polyphenols, fibers, and nitrates that help open blood vessels so that more oxygen can get to your muscles. And the cyclists, they just drank 17 ounces or 500 cc's a day. But the divers, they just took 2.5 fluid ounces. And it's hard to believe that on this table are really powerful medicines. Now, I was blessed to have reversed my health struggles, reduced my inflammation when I was younger so that I could correct my diet, develop good habits, and to prevent more deadly, irreversible health struggles that I see on a daily basis when at work. And this is why I invest in my health daily, and I invest in fresh produce weekly. This is actually my weekly produce for my family. And I don't always finish everything in a week, but I try very hard. And honestly, there aren't enough leafy greens on this table to last a week. So I actually have more leafy greens in my refrigerator, but it didn't fit on this table. This is how I grew up, with an abundance of fresh produce in our home, alongside with an abundance of highly processed inflammatory foods. My parents showed me the best of both worlds and allowed me to go back and forth between eating the antidote and the poisons. And as a young physician, I used to give my children the same options because I didn't want to deprive them. And really, I didn't want to deprive myself. I bought the foods because I was addicted and I wanted to eat this. But now I have buried my addiction to highly processed food, and I really try not to keep any in the house because I don't enjoy eating them. Now, it doesn't mean that my children don't eat processed food. They are exposed to plenty of it at church, at schools, and at parties. I have come to the conclusion that I don't need to train them to eat processed food. They will naturally eat it because it's that tempting. It's like an iPad. There's no need to give your children an iPad in the pretense that you're training them how to use a computer. So I've spent my effort instead encouraging my kids to eat whole foods like plants that are on my table and to read real books that are printed on paper. So number 6 are avocados. And honestly, I eat avocados because they make eating my vegetables and salads tasty. Now, one medium-sized avocado has 22 grams of fat, which is mostly monounsaturated fats. And if you like the taste of modern foods, then you are eating a high-fat diet. So it's good to upgrade the type of fat that you're eating. When you add fat to food, you simply will eat more of that food. Now, have you eaten a cake that didn't have any fats or oils? Or salads without an oil or fat-based dressing? Or maybe even a piece of toast without any butter, cream cheese, or peanut butter? Yeah, most people won't eat much of it. And have you ever stir-fried vegetables without adding any cooking oils? So this creamy texture of fats and oils is why foods taste better and why people will eat more of it. And this is how our palates are being manipulated by food companies and restaurants. And avocado oil, remember, is not a food. It is an ingredient from a food. It's not a whole avocado. Now, this doesn't mean you can't use avocado oils to cook your food. The point is, it's a processed ingredient. And we're confusing ingredients from actual foods. And when we learn which foods are processed and understand that we need to limit them and that they're not real food and eat real food when we have that option, this is where our health will lie. In addition to the fats, avocados have fiber, B vitamins, carotenoids, vitamin K, vitamin E, vitamin C. A medium avocado actually has more potassium than a medium banana. Now, when you buy an avocado unripe, it feels rock hard like this. Okay, it is kind of greenish and it's not so tasty if you open this, and it's harder to open. So this is an unripe fruit. And like other fruits that ripen, it'll soften when it ripens. And this is a ripened avocado. And when I feel this fruit, it kind of indents. I really don't want to indent it because I want to eat it later, but you can feel it give. And you need to test all around the avocado to make sure that all of it is ripened. And at that point, I need to either eat this today or refrigerate it so that it can last longer. Now, my friend in Hawaii has a large avocado tree in her front yard. And once I visited her and her avocados were blooming all over her tree, I was so excited, but I never got to eat any because that avocado wouldn't ripen. I even put it in the bag. I put other ripe fruits in it, and it was so disappointing. Have you seen how big a Hawaiian avocado can get? And avocados help make this stuff taste better. Or I just make a chunky dip with avocados. I add tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers, and that's my salsa or an avocado salad. And my favorite way to eat an avocado is to cut it up in strips with Persian cucumbers and eat it with a sushi seaweed wrap. And that crunch, that creamy texture, oh, I thoroughly enjoy that mouthfeel. Now this week, I got a lot of Persian cucumbers, which is number 7. And honestly, I eat these cucumbers because they are convenient and crunchy. I just need crunchy foods. I will just wash them and eat them as is, as a snack, and replace my desire to look for crunchy junk food. Now, however, sometimes I still crave for junk food and junk food flavors. These are really powerful flavorings. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that is embedded in all of our food, whether you eat plants or meats or junk food. And this is why a bag of Doritos will sell so much better than plain tortilla chips with some salt. And this is also why soda sells instead of just adding sugar to your water. So if you're learning how to eat plants, it's important to seek plants that are rich in flavor and to reduce your seeking for flavor-rich junk food. And if I ate a bland cucumber that was soft, I would not have the same experience and probably wouldn't order so many cucumbers. And this is why I don't boil cucumbers. Now, I want to point out that there are squashes next to my Persian cucumbers. And you see how the stems and the squashes are pretty big and the cucumbers are really tiny? That's really important to tell the difference between a squash and a cucumber because they taste nothing alike. And I can eat many vegetables raw, but not squash. There's something about that dry texture that I just don't like. And finding that right texture will get you to eat more food. And that's why your favorite processed food tastes and feels that way. So if you want to eat something healthier, then pair it with a texture you like. So if you want to give up something that is unhealthy, then it's important to remove that texture you seek. And even though I don't prefer raw squashes, I like cooked zucchini. Here is a easy roasted zucchini recipe that I will do weekly. I basically wash the zucchinis and then I will chop the zucchini up in large pieces and halves. Now I pour some avocado oil on my glove because I basically just want to thinly coat the oil on my hand so that I can rub my hand against the zucchini and transfer that coat of oil. I don't want to drown my food in oil. And my kids, they like the texture of oil, and oil does add flavor depending on which oil you're putting in. And by putting it on my hand, I can use less oil. So then I sprinkle it generously with onion powder. That aroma of the onions, that sweet taste, will get me to eat more. Now I'm going to line them up on parchment paper face down. And this whole thing I put in the oven covered at 350 degrees for roughly 30 minutes. And the last probably about 5 to 10 minutes, I'll leave it uncovered. It comes out moist, sweet, slightly chewy, and soft. And this is one of my favorite easy ways to eat zucchini and squashes. Number 8 is a kiwi fruit. Now, did you know that eating kiwi fruit can actually boost your natural killer cell activity and can also boost your response to vaccines? Now, this translates into significantly reducing the severity and duration of colds and sore throats. And as a young mom, I was always worried that my kids would get sick. And so it was comforting to me to see that kids actually got less colds and flu-like illnesses just by eating kiwis. Now, however, kiwis isn't for everyone as it ranks number 3 for potential food allergies. Do you see the berries at the corner of my tables? Well, my kids, they fight over raspberries, which are number 9. And so one year we went to a raspberry farm in Washington, and oh my, if you've never had a bush ripened raspberry, it is so worth doing if you ever get the chance. The raspberry fragrance is so powerful when the berries are allowed to sun ripen and not picked early, like the ones from the supermarket. Honestly, I don't even smell it. And there's no way around selling these raspberries in mass quantities when they're ripened. They just don't last. And that's why I think some of the produce in the big warehouse conglomerates are just simply not so fresh. Unfortunately, I don't have a raspberry farm around me, so I still have to buy supermarket raspberries. But occasionally I'll find a farmer's market to get riper ones, and I'll get those. But the real jewel of why I spend the money for raspberries is because it's actually been shown to reduce inflammation in arteries, and they're associated with lowering the risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is because raspberries, they're packed with bile-active polyphenols like anthocyanins and oligotannins, which have also been shown to improve blood lipid panels, glycemic index, and blood pressure. Now, these molecules, they can enter the bloodstream an hour after eating raspberries. And when your raspberries get to your colon, healthy gut microbes transform these polyphenols into urolithins that activate mitophagy, a recycling program to clear poorly functioning mitochondria that contributes to diseases. Urolithins can stay in the body for up to 80 hours. That's 3.3 days after eating this raspberry, where it continues to act like antioxidants, signaling nerve 2 expression to protect cells against oxidative damage. There are so many ways polyphenols in berries can reduce inflammation. But when I was a struggling student, instead of using my money to buy raspberries, I spent it in bagel shops and boba tea shops. Now, granted, at a time, a bagel and a cup of tea cost about $1 each, which translates to roughly $10 a week. Now, you can't buy boba tea without spending probably $6 a glass, which would have easily allowed me to buy berries at least twice a week. Now, I used to reward myself with passion fruit jasmine boba green teas. I love the fragrance of passion fruits, and one day it dawned on me to ask the tea shop if the flavors were real juice, and the answer was no. I was so disappointed. But I began drinking just unflavored jasmine boba green tea. And then I realized that the boba was essentially just slurping in a bunch of sugar, so I stopped eating boba too. Now, one day I sat in my car after paying $6 for a cup of plain jasmine green tea, which I have a ton of in my kitchen cupboard. So I realized I've been such an idiot that I'm paying $6 for people to give me water. So that week I told myself I'm not buying any more teas, and I started saving money. I saved $30 in a week, and I put that in fresher produce. But tasty, good raspberries are hard to find. And that's why I prefer to eat number 10, blueberries. Now, someone recently asked me if foods can improve memory. Now, luckily, I don't have to pick one food, and that's why I put kale with my blueberries to drink it in my shake daily. Now, many people think being a doctor requires a lot of brain power and thinking, and it really does. But honestly, this is the same brain power that everybody should be using, and everybody should be thinking about everything they're doing, as every job is just as important as being a doctor to support our communities. So if you have checked out of your job and not putting more thought, then you are either ready for a new job or you're missing some blueberries in your diet and you're eating too much saturated fat. Now, it's really not just the blueberries. It's those strawberries. It's really all the berries that I eat every week. I actively put savings into my memory bank. And by the time other people notice that you have dementia, you're already pretty far along. Dementia takes years to accumulate into noticeable symptoms. Now, my mom had Alzheimer's dementia, and it's a miserable disease to have. The habits that you develop before you have symptoms determine how you're going to behave in those early years in dementia. So I'm trying to train myself to have good habits by eating certain foods every day, so that if I ever get there, and I hopefully never will get there, I'll make it easier for those who are caring for me. There is a genetic test for Alzheimer's. 5% of people who get early onset Alzheimer's have rare genetic mutations. They are super rare. There's another gene called ApoE4 that elevates a person's risk. Those who inherit 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene have 8 times the risk factors of developing Alzheimer's. Now, I don't know if I have ApoE4 genes or not. And honestly, I don't really care. Since I can't do anything about that, I'm not going to go get my genes changed. And I'm doing everything that I can to optimize my memory. Now, I can, however, do everything in my power to optimize my brain function. And that includes not drinking, not doing illicit drugs, avoiding saturated fats, and eating foods that nourish my brain, like blueberries. Now, if you're still wondering which foods I cut out that made the greatest difference in my inflammation and my son's inflammation, well, that was chicken. Now, my baby went from full-blown Red Lobster to normal within a week after I stopped eating chicken. I couldn't believe chicken was the culprit, because I thought of all the foods that I stopped, chicken would be the least allergenic. But then one day I realized that chicken is actually a really dirty food. And there are so many different types of drug-resistant bacteria that's on chicken that probably contaminated my gut microbiome. One day, I ran out of freshly produced breast milk because I wasn't producing a lot since I was overworking. I didn't even get to complete my maternity leave. My mother-in-law gave my son my painfully saved freezer full of breast milk. Those breast pumps, they're not exactly comfortable. So that evening when I came home, my son started scratching, and by night, he was already flaring with red patches. Now, I had carefully saved my freezer with breast milk in case of an emergency in which I didn't produce enough milk before I left. But all that milk was created eating chicken. And unfortunately, it pained me to throw all of that away. But I had to, because finally I can identify why his eczema was so bad. Now, I ate a lot of chicken in the beginning of my journey. In fact, my mom brought me a black chicken after I delivered. It's some kind of Chinese nutrition ritual. I didn't eat it. And in fact, ever since I found out that chicken was a culprit of our inflammation, I just simply have stopped eating chicken. And I still don't eat chicken now. And if you want to know why, check out my next video.